Some books about success try to motivate you with urgency. Some try to impress you with systems, rules, or formulas. The Almanack of Naval Ravikant feels different almost immediately. It is thoughtful rather than loud. It is compact, but it carries unusual density. It does not promise a fast path to achievement, nor does it offer a conventional self-help blueprint. Instead, it gathers and organizes the ideas of Naval Ravikant, an entrepreneur, investor, and public thinker whose reflections on wealth, happiness, judgment, and freedom have influenced a wide audience. What makes this book distinctive is not only the content, but the tension it holds so well. It speaks about ambition, but it does not worship status. It speaks about wealth, but it treats money as a means rather than an end. It speaks about happiness, but not in a sentimental way. It is practical and philosophical at the same time. In this summary, we will explore the book slowly and clearly. We will look at its core vision of wealth, the role of leverage, the importance of specific knowledge, the meaning of accountability and long-term games, and the second half of the book, where Naval turns inward and asks what happiness really is. The more closely you read the almanac, the more it seems to be about one central idea. Build a life where your external structures and your inner state support one another. Build wealth that gives you freedom. Build self-understanding that gives you peace. And build both in a way that reflects who you really are, rather than what the world reflexively rewards. It helps to understand the form of the book before moving into its ideas. The Almanack of Naval Ravikant is not written like a traditional argument-driven work. It is curated. Eric Jorgenson collected Naval's public ideas from interviews, podcasts, tweets, and essays, then arranged them into a structure that reads like a coherent philosophy. This matters because the book's style shapes its effect. Many of the lines are compressed, aphoristic, and memorable. They feel quotable because they were often born in conversation or reflection rather than in academic exposition. Yet the curation gives them progression. You move from Naval's background into wealth creation, leverage, judgment, reading, happiness, and peace. The result feels like a distilled operating system rather than a standard business book. That is part of its appeal. It reads as though someone took years of scattered insights and arranged them into a compact map for thinking about life. Because of that, the book works less like a rigid method and more like a lens. It asks the reader to see differently. And once that way of seeing begins to take hold, ordinary decisions around work, money, learning, ambition, and desire begin to look different as well. Most books lean in one direction. They're either about external success or inner peace. The Almanac tries to hold both. Naval is deeply interested in wealth, but not in wealth as vanity. He is interested in wealth because it can create independence. He is deeply interested in happiness, but not in happiness as surface positivity. He is interested in happiness as freedom from inner agitation. This combination gives the book much of its force. It suggests that a complete life cannot be built by optimizing only one dimension. A person can become financially successful and remain inwardly restless. Another person can develop philosophical calm while remaining structurally trapped by money, dependence, or lack of freedom. Naval's vision is more integrated. Build external freedom and internal peace together. Let wealth reduce coercion. Let wisdom reduce suffering. Let your choices become more deliberate in both directions. This is why the book resonates with people who are tired of simplistic messages. It does not say ambition is bad. It does not say detachment means giving up. It says something harder and more interesting. Pursue excellence without becoming enslaved by comparison. Build wealth without worshiping status. Seek peace without abandoning agency. In a sense, the book's real promise is integration. It wants a life where achievement does not destroy serenity, and where serenity does not require passivity. One of Naval's most important distinctions is between wealth, money, and status. Many people use these words almost interchangeably, but the book insists they are different. Money is a tool. It is a medium of exchange, a way of storing and transferring value across time and place. Status is a social game. It is relative, competitive, and often based on how one person ranks against another. Wealth is different from both. Wealth consists of assets that earn while you sleep. It is the machinery of value creation that keeps working even when you are not directly trading your hours for income. This definition matters because it changes what people should aim at. If you chase money alone, you may end up in an endless cycle of labor. If you chase status, you may enter a game that has no stable finish line because someone else will always seem above you. But if you pursue wealth in Naval's sense, you are really pursuing freedom. You are trying to build ownership, systems, and assets that reduce your dependence on direct labor and external permission. The emotional insight here is also important. Many people say they want money when what they really want is relief, autonomy, and optionality. They want the ability to choose where they live, what they work on, and how their days are shaped. Naval's definition cuts closer to that reality. Wealth is valuable because it creates room. It gives a person more control over time, attention, and life direction. That is why the book repeatedly steers the reader away from appearance and toward structure. Do not ask what looks rich. Ask what produces freedom. If wealth is the result of owning scalable assets, then leverage becomes one of the book's key concepts. Naval argues that modern wealth creation increasingly depends on leverage, the ability to multiply the effects of your actions beyond the limits of your personal time. Traditional labor is linear. You work 1 hour and get paid for 1 hour. There is nothing wrong with honest labor, but it creates a ceiling. Leverage breaks that ceiling. Code can be written once and used by millions. Media can be created once and distributed globally. Products can be built and sold repeatedly. Capital can be invested and continue generating returns. Teams and systems can extend the reach of your decisions. Naval treats these forms of leverage as historically significant because they allow individuals to have impact at a scale once reserved for large institutions. This is one reason the book feels so modern. It understands that the internet changed the economics of personal output. A writer, founder, developer, or creator can now build something with compounding reach. But the deeper lesson is broader than technology. It is about how to think. If your goal is freedom, then you must eventually ask whether your work can scale beyond your direct labor. Can something you create continue to produce value without your constant presence? Can you own a piece of a system rather than only renting out time inside one? Naval is not encouraging fantasy. He is encouraging structural thinking. Wealth grows most powerfully when your output is detached from the limits of immediate effort. Leverage is the mechanism that makes that detachment possible. Another defining idea in the Almanack is specific knowledge. Naval uses this phrase to describe knowledge that cannot be easily taught in a formulaic classroom way because it lives at the intersection of talent, curiosity, obsession, lived experience, and personal style. Specific knowledge is not generic competence. It is not simply following instructions better than everyone else. It is a kind of differentiated capability that often emerges when someone goes deeply into what they are naturally drawn toward. This idea is powerful because it challenges standardized thinking about careers and success. Many people are taught to pursue credentials first and self-knowledge later, if at all. Naval inverts that logic. He suggests that real advantage often comes from understanding what you can uniquely do, what comes alive for you, and what kinds of work you would pursue intensely even before external rewards fully appeared. This is not an anti-discipline message. In fact, specific knowledge often requires immense effort. But the effort feels different because it is aligned with genuine interest. The person is not merely forcing themselves into a template. They are becoming unusually good at something that is deeply theirs. This is why the concept feels liberating to so many readers. It implies that success does not have to come from imitation. You do not win most powerfully by becoming a slightly better copy of someone else. You win by becoming a more fully developed version of yourself in a domain where that distinctiveness creates value. Naval repeatedly emphasizes accountability. In a world full of noise, imitation, and low-commitment opinions, accountability becomes a rare and powerful signal. When you put your name on something, when you take responsibility for an outcome, when you stand publicly behind your work, you create trust. You also create pressure that can sharpen quality. This theme connects closely to another of the book's recurring principles: play long-term games with long-term people. Naval believes that many of the best outcomes in life come from repeated interaction with trustworthy people over time. Relationships compound. Reputation compounds. Trust compounds. The most meaningful opportunities are often not isolated transactions, but the result of durable credibility. This is why the book often sounds quietly ethical even when discussing business. Honesty is not just morally admirable. It is strategically intelligent in long-term systems. Reliability matters because trust is a form of hidden leverage. People want to keep working with those whose word holds. The implication is that real success is not built only from brilliance. It is also built from character expressed consistently over time. Quick wins can tempt people into games of extraction, manipulation, or imitation, but Naval's philosophy is more patient. Find people worth building with. Do work worth being known for. Let time deepen both. In that world, reputation is not a superficial brand. It is an accumulated record of being real, useful, and dependable. One reason Naval's ideas travel so widely is that they often return to judgment. He values intelligence, but he values judgment even more. Judgment is the ability to see clearly, think independently, and make good decisions under uncertainty. It is not identical to raw cleverness. It includes patience, emotional steadiness, perspective, and the willingness to examine assumptions instead of copying consensus. In the book, judgment becomes a kind of invisible multiplier. Two people may have similar information, but the one with stronger judgment uses it better. This matters in business, investing, relationships, and life design. The book encourages first principles thinking, which means reducing ideas to what is fundamentally true rather than merely inherited. It also encourages independence from social contagion. The world is full of status signals, trend pressure, and borrowed opinions. If you do not think for yourself, you can spend years chasing goals that were never actually yours. Naval's vision of intelligence is therefore not performative. It is practical. Learn to observe reality. Learn to think slowly when the crowd is reacting fast. Learn to distinguish signal from noise. This theme also explains why reading matters so much in the book. Reading is not presented as a badge of sophistication, but as a way of quietly compounding models, perspective, and inner depth. Good judgment emerges not from constant stimulation, but from accumulated understanding. Naval places unusual emphasis on reading and solitary reflection. In an age that rewards speed, visibility, and reaction, this can feel almost countercultural. But in his framework, wisdom is not built through noise. It is built through calm accumulation. Read broadly. Think deeply. Let ideas settle. Develop your own internal models instead of outsourcing your mind to the crowd. This part of the book is easy to underestimate because it sounds gentle, but it is foundational. Naval sees the mind itself as one of the primary instruments through which life is experienced. If that instrument is cluttered, frantic, or chronically reactive, then even success can feel chaotic. Reading and reflection are ways of training the instrument. They allow patterns to emerge. They create distance from cultural pressure. They make judgment steadier. The broader message is that a high-quality life is built not only from external action, but from internal refinement. Some of the most important progress in life is invisible. It happens in what you understand, what you no longer chase, and how you learn to think. Roughly halfway through the almanac, the center of gravity begins to shift. The book turns from wealth outward to happiness inward. This transition is crucial because it reveals that Naval is not simply offering a strategy for external success. He is asking what all that success is actually for. In this part of the book, happiness is described less as excitement and more as peace. It is not constant pleasure, endless stimulation, or the emotional high of achievement. Those states come and go. Naval is interested in something more stable. What remains when the mind is no longer so agitated by craving, resentment, comparison, fear, or endless internal commentary? This is an important move because it challenges one of the modern world's default assumptions. We often behave as if happiness is waiting for us just beyond the next milestone. Once I earn more. Once I win more recognition. Once I fix this one thing. But the mind often carries its restlessness forward into every new achievement. Naval's argument is that if the machinery of dissatisfaction is left unexamined, no external result will permanently solve it. In that sense, happiness is not mainly a reward. It is a practice of seeing clearly and releasing unnecessary disturbance. A recurring idea in the happiness sections is that much suffering comes from the mind's own movement. Desire multiplies. Comparison multiplies. The self keeps building stories about what is missing, what others have, what should be different, and what must happen before peace is allowed. Naval does not deny that human beings need goals or that ambition can be meaningful. But he warns that unconscious desire can become endless. If your happiness depends on a moving target, then your inner life remains outsourced to conditions. This is why he often sounds skeptical of status games. Status is fundamentally comparative. It can never be fully secured because it always depends on where you stand relative to others. Wealth, at least in its preferred sense, can create freedom. Status often creates obsession. The book gently but persistently asks the reader to notice these traps. What are you chasing because you truly value it, and what are you chasing because it flatters the ego? What do you genuinely need, and what have you absorbed from culture, competition, or insecurity? These are not merely moral questions. They are practical questions about peace. If the mind is constantly measuring, resenting, and projecting, then contentment becomes structurally difficult. To reduce suffering, Naval suggests, one must reduce the number of internal wars being fought without necessity. One of the most memorable claims in the book is that happiness is a skill. This does not mean happiness is easy, or that pain is illusory, or that one can simply choose joy by pretending circumstances do not matter. The claim is more disciplined than that. It means that mental peace can be cultivated. You can train attention. You can observe your thoughts instead of obeying all of them. You can develop greater equanimity. You can weaken habits of resentment and compulsive reaction. You can learn to enjoy the present more directly. In other words, just as wealth requires a structure, happiness requires a practice. The idea is powerful because it shifts the locus of control inward without becoming simplistic. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions, you begin working on the quality of your own consciousness. Meditation, stillness, self-awareness, and philosophical reflection all play a role here. Naval often sounds adjacent to contemplative traditions, though he speaks in a modern, stripped-down vocabulary. The central point remains clear. If you do not learn how your own mind creates suffering, you may remain trapped by it no matter how much external progress you make. But if you learn to relate to the mind more skillfully, life can become lighter even before the outer world is fully solved. At a deeper level, the wealth and happiness sections of the book are not separate. They meet in the idea of freedom. Wealth matters because it can buy back time, reduce coercion, and create optionality. Happiness matters because without inner peace, freedom can be wasted in distraction, compulsion, or anxiety. The best life, in Naval's framework, is one in which you are not ruled from either direction. You are not structurally trapped by money, and you are not internally trapped by the mind's endless disturbances. This integrated vision is what makes the book feel larger than a typical entrepreneurship text. It is really asking what it would mean to live by design, to choose your work rather than merely accept it, to relate to desire rather than be dragged by it. To build enough wealth that your life is not constantly forced from the outside, and enough wisdom that your life is not constantly unsettled from the inside. Freedom here is not rebellion for its own sake. It is the condition in which your time, attention, and decisions belong more fully to you. One of the useful things about the Almanack is that it gives principles rather than rigid instructions. That makes it easier to revisit across different stages of life. In practical terms, the book invites several kinds of action. First, clarify the difference between money, status, and wealth in your own thinking. Stop treating them as if they are the same. Second, examine whether your work creates ownership, leverage, or only temporary compensation. Third, identify areas of specific knowledge, the things you are unusually suited for, the things you can pursue deeply enough that your uniqueness becomes an advantage. Fourth, build long-term relationships with trustworthy people and take accountability seriously. Fifth, create more time for reading, reflection, and independent thought. Sixth, study your own mind. Notice where dissatisfaction is being created by comparison, ego, or uncontrolled desire. Seventh, redefine success around freedom instead of approval. None of these are instant tactics. They are orientation changes. But orientation changes can quietly reshape an entire life. The strength of the book lies in giving the reader a vocabulary for those shifts. Once you have the vocabulary, it becomes harder to live unconsciously. The Almanack of Naval Ravikant endures because it compresses an unusually large set of insights into a concise and memorable form. But beneath all the quotes and principles, the book offers something very simple and very demanding. Build a life that belongs to you. Not a life governed by borrowed status games, inherited assumptions, or endless imitation. Build one around freedom, judgment, ownership, peace, and self-knowledge. Wealth, in this view, is not for display but for independence. Happiness is not for performance, but for direct experience. Wisdom is not about sounding deep, but about suffering less and seeing more clearly. The book does not promise perfection, and it does not pretend the path is easy. But it does offer a compelling standard. Live in such a way that your work scales, your mind settles, and your choices increasingly reflect what is real and deeply yours. That is why the book stays with readers. It is not only about doing better. It is about becoming more free, more thoughtful, and less divided inside your own life.